The ninth characteristic that I would like to share with you is that even though the Father and the Son are on a level of equality as persons, the Son from eternity past has been subject to his Father's authority as his head. That is clearly stated in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3, where it says clearly that the Father is the head of Christ. God is the head of Christ.
La Antorcha Profética, donde recibirás la única y verdadera profecía ante este tiempo final.
Hola a todos, en el día de hoy vamos a hablar sobre una noticia que ha causado bastante revuelo en el mundo adventista. Resulta que el pastor Esteban Bor ha sido prohibido de predicar en una iglesia adventista que está bajo la autoridad de la Conferencia de Potomac en los Estados Unidos. La razón detrás de esto es que Bor ha estado predicando dos puntos que no han sido muy bien recibidos por los líderes adventistas de Potomac. El primero de ellos es que Jesús, desde que nació en la eternidad, ha estado y por siempre estará sujeto a la autoridad de su Padre. El segundo punto es que la última generación de cristianos alcanzará la victoria sobre el pecado y tendrá el carácter de Cristo. Antes de profundizar en estos puntos, es importante entender que las invitaciones de las iglesias locales que hacen para que vengan oradores de otras partes deben pasar por la evaluación de la asociación. En este sentido, la asociación de Potomac se comunicó con la Junta de la Iglesia de Roanoke, donde se había invitado al pastor Bor para cancelar la invitación. Pero la Iglesia de Roanoke aún mantiene su posición y por ello el 22 de abril, mañana, serán visitados por los miembros de la Asociación de Potomac y la Unión de Columbia sobre las políticas actuales sobre Esteban Bor. Ahora bien, la preocupación de los líderes adventistas de Potomac tiene que ver con dos posiciones de Bor. La primera, como ya vimos, su posición sobre la divinidad de Jesús. Bor afirma que Jesús fue engendrado en la eternidad por el Padre y nació de su seno, tal como lo presentó en el sermón The Nature of God the Father and the Son. Para reforzar su posición, Bor recurre a 1 Corintios 11, 1 al 3, que demuestra una jefatura del hombre sobre la mujer y por consiguiente del Padre sobre el Hijo. Aunque él afirma que Jesús y el Padre son iguales porque tienen la misma sustancia, afirma que el Padre tiene una autoridad absoluta y el Hijo una autoridad delegada. Esta posición es la que ha sido cuestionada por los líderes adventistas de Potomac, ya que va en contra de la doctrina de la Trinidad, que establece que no hay subordinacionismo del Hijo para con el Padre. Bor mostró los textos que apoyan su posición. 1 Corintios 11:3, donde dice que Dios es la cabeza de Cristo. Historia de la Redención, página 13, donde dice que Dios ordenó que su Hijo fuera igual a Él. Patriarca y Profeta, página 36, donde dice que Dios hizo un concilio de los ángeles para mostrar la posición del Hijo. Y Mateo 28:19, donde ya Jesús encarnado dice que recibe autoridad de su Padre. Y hablando hacia el futuro, cita 1 Corintios 15:28, donde dice que el Hijo también estará sujeto. Nosotros, aunque nos alegramos de que Bor haya dado este paso, tememos que haga lo mismo que David Gay, quien luego se retractó por miedo a perder el apoyo económico en su ministerio.
The ninth characteristic that I would like to share with you is that even though the Father and the Son are on a level of equality as persons, the Son from eternity past has been subject to his Father's authority as his head. That is clearly stated in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3, where it says clearly that the Father is the head of Christ. God is the head of Christ. And so Christ in eternity past, even before the creation of the angels, was subject to his Father's authority, even though he was equal to his Father. In eternity past, in the present, and in eternity future, both the Father and the Son have authority and dominion, but the Father has absolute authority and the Son has delegated authority, even though they are equal. Never has Jesus ever acted independently of his Father. He has ever been subject to his Father's authority and his Father's will. You might be thinking, well, that happened since the incarnation, that he was subject to his Father's will, even though he's equal to his Father. Not so. Let me read you a couple of statements from the Spirit of Prophecy. The first one is found In Story of Redemption, page 13, you know, Lucifer in heaven said, hey, Jesus and me are equal, we're the same, and yet Jesus is favored and I'm not favored. So the Father had to call a meeting in heaven of all of the heavenly council to explain the position of his Son. This is before the creation of the world. Notice this statement: the great Creator, referring to the Father, assembled the heavenly host that he might, that is, that the Father might, in the presence of all of the angels, confer special honor upon his Son. The Son was seated. Was Jesus the Son already? Yes. The Son was seated on the throne with the Father, and the heavenly throng of holy angels was gathered around them. The Father then made known, notice who's making known. The Father then made known that it was ordained by himself, that is, by the Father, that Christ, his Son, should be equal with himself, so that wherever was the presence of his Son, it was as his own presence. The word of the Son was to be obeyed as readily as the word of the Father. His Son, he had invested with authority to command the heavenly host. What had the Father done? He is the one that had invested the Son with authority to command the heavenly host. And then she continues saying, especially was his Son to work in union with himself in the anticipated creation of the earth and every living thing that should exist upon the earth. His Son, listen carefully, his Son would carry out his will and his purposes, that is the Father's, but would do nothing of himself alone. The Father's will would be fulfilled in him. Clear. Another statement that we find in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 36, adds some details. We're told there, the King of the universe, notice this is a reference to God the Father, the King of the universe summoned the heavenly host before him, that in their presence he might set forth the true position of his Son and show the relation he sustained to all the created beings. The Son of God shared the Father's throne, and the glory of the eternal self-existent one encircled both. Before the assembled inhabitants of heaven, the King, that's the Father, the King declared that none but Christ, the only begotten of God, could fully enter into his purposes, and to him it was committed to execute the mighty counsels of his will, that is, of the Father's will. The Son of God had wrought the Father's will. Listen carefully. The Son of God had wrought the Father's will in the creation of all the hosts of heaven. Who created the angels? Jesus. Whose will was he performing? The will of his Father. So once again, the Son of God had wrought the Father's will in the creation of all the hosts of heaven. And to him, as well as to God, their homage and allegiance were due. Christ was still to exercise divine power in the creation of the earth and its inhabitants. But in all this, he would not seek power or exaltation for himself, contrary to God's plan, but would exalt the Father's glory and execute his purposes of beneficence and love. Is that clear? Crystal, if you read it with an open mind and an open heart. You know, even after Jesus became incarnate, he was still subject to the Father's will. In Matthew chapter 28 and verse 18, right before the Great Commission, it says, and Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and in earth. Who is the only one that could have given him the authority? Only his Father. And the Bible teaches that in eternity future, the Son will still be subject to his Father. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 28 says, now when all things are made subject to him, then the Son himself will also be subject to him who put all things under him, that God may be all in all.
La razón por la cual él no escoge más a menudo a hombres de saber y encumbrados para dirigir los movimientos de reforma es porque confían en sus credos, teorías y sistemas teológicos, y no sienten la necesidad de ser enseñados por Dios. Solo aquellos que están en unión personal con la fuente de la sabiduría son capaces de comprender o explicar las Escrituras. Los hombres poco versados en conocimientos escolásticos son llamados a veces a declarar la verdad, no porque sean ignorantes, sino porque no son demasiado pagados de sí mismos para dejarse enseñar por Dios. Conflicto de los siglos, página 449.